Good morning. I'm Gary Beachner with Beachner Grain. We're located in Parsons, Kansas, which is in the southeast part of the state, little community of about 10,000 people. And we have facilities in southeastern Kansas, eastern Kansas, and northeast Oklahoma, where we handle grain, fertilizer, manufacture feed, and process seed products. You just heard about the urgent needs, for the river system here, and we've heard from a lot of experts that handle a tremendous amount of volume up and down the river, and that have firsthand knowledge, with their facilities and their movements, what the needs are on the system. But and we've also heard about, how important that this is to Kansas. I was particularly interested in this document that Thad prepared here that talks about, the total tons that originate from Kansas or coming to Kansas just through the Oklahoma ports. Looks like it's about 2.9 million tons. That's about a fourth of the total tonnages. One in every 4 barges up and down the Ark River that you see, between Tulsa and the Mississippi River are destined to or from Kansas, which is kind of surprising to me. I didn't know it was near that much.
We didn't either.
Yeah, it was a significant amount. I'll skip through some of the importance because these guys have all talked about. I'll talk about specifically in the southeast district of Kansas and what they call the east central district of Kansas. We have Kansas divided up into 9 separate districts, and the southeast district, borders Oklahoma and Missouri, and of course the east central district just borders Missouri, and they're stacked on top of each other. But from that part of the state, over the last couple of years, 2016 we raised about 200 million bushels of grain total, and in 2017 is about 175 million bushel grain in those 2 districts. We are in about 12 of those counties, so I think we have a pretty good feel for where the grain goes in those districts. We think there's just a little over 80% of the wheat in that part of the state that goes down the Ark River, and there's we think right at 38% of the soybeans in the last 2 years have been going down the Ark River. So that's a significant amount of the total crop that's used in the Ark River. But what's really staggering in that part of the state is basically 100% of our dry fertilizer that we use for fertilizing crops and grasslands comes off the Ark River. I mean, 100% of that. I know in the Tulsa area alone, I think there's just a little over, between the Port of Catoosa and Port 33 area, a little over 200,000 tons now of dry fertilizer storage. Steve just said there's about 2.2 million tons, that comes up the river, so they've got basically storage capacity there for about 10%, of the annual tonnages going through there. So they got to keep things moving. It's about a 30-day barge ride, from New Orleans up there. So, they got to keep things moving all the time. There's a lot of product on the river that's afloat. You think about it, you got about 10% of the total usage is afloat all the time on the way to the river. So it's a pretty significant supply chain logistical puzzle that they have to manage to keep products coming and going for our state. And again, a fourth of those are coming from or destined to Kansas. There's a little bit of a shift in the dynamics, and the fertilizer guys can tell you this more than anything. We've had some expanded nitrogen capacities coming online here in Oklahoma and West Texas that may change the total percentages of fertilizers that are coming through the river system destined for that area. But again, a competitive infrastructure, waterway systems also keeps everybody honest, railroads, manufacturers, and everything. When I did this a year ago, I looked this up, and this may change a little bit as we have these new nitrogen numbers come, but like I said, the MKARNS handles 100% of the dry fertilizer in the southeast and the east central districts of Kansas. It appeared that about 2/3 of the dry fertilizer for the central 1/3 of Kansas, those 3 districts there, almost 2/3 of that dry fertilizer comes out of the Port of Catoosa areas, and we think that was just over a third, somewhere between a third and 40% of the western part of the state of the dry fertilizers the previous years have been coming through the Ark River system. So significant amounts for the whole areas of the state. Again, the MKARNS is especially important for our district of the state, our 2 districts. World populations are definitely increasing. The U.S. is in a constant battle to keep their share of the market. to supply the rest of the world. And I think all of us are convinced that the U.S. farmers are going to respond. The industry are going to innovate and do the things they need to respond. We just need to make sure that our citizenry stands up and understands the importance of us competing in the world markets, that they make those commitments to keep these inland waterway systems viable and improving for a growing world population. But anyway, again, thanks for the opportunity to be here today, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Gary, you said 38%
Soybeans.
soybeans for your two, or those two districts go to the river?
Yes.
What happens to the other portion?
We've got domestic soy processors. You know, we've got 2 in Kansas, 1 across the state line there, just across from Fort Scott there that ADM has, and 1 in Kansas City. So you got 4 domestic soy processors that are kind of surrounding the area. So and there's times that there's a significant pull sometimes towards St. Louis. At times there's something unusual moving from St. Louis over that area that backhauls.
Thank you.
You bet.
Last year, Gary, you were talking about the difference in the freight rate going up if that system fails and what it would mean to Kansas farmers. Could you kind of go over that?
Yeah, and I heard the numbers here earlier today, and I think that they were being extremely conservative. You know, I think we heard maybe Jared talk about $10 to $20 a ton, you know, on fertilizer. That's the difference today. If you had to do without the inland waterway system and the competitors knew that you didn't have inland waterway system to compete with, guess what would happen to those rail rates? You know, so 20 to 40 bucks a ton, I think, is extremely conservative for fertilizer. On grains, I would venture to say it'd be probably closer to 30 to 70 cents. It depends, you know, on the wheat and soybeans in particular. You know, corn raised in our part of the state is pretty much consumed there in that 4-state area there. You know, eastern Oklahoma, western Arkansas through the poultry markets, but corn and soybeans, soybeans and wheat, it'd be a significant hit.
Would it be difficult for the farmers to keep farming with that price increase for what they would get in their pockets?
In the end, the farmer pays the freight all the way to the end consumer, no matter where it is in the world. I mean, you think about it, it's only worth so much delivered to China, and all the transportation costs to get it there from the farm gate is pretty much paid by the farmer. So you increase those costs, you decrease, you know, what the farmer is able to sell it for. Thank you.